the WrestleHavoc Podcast on YouTube, where we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. We talk all that goes on in the realm of WWE and AEW every week. And now, here's your host, the one that will give you a reality check on pro wrestling, Flamin' Ricky DeReyes. This is the WrestleHavoc Podcast.
What's up, everybody? It is Flamin' Ricky DeReyes, right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast, here to review AEW Revolution 2023. We got a lot, and I mean a lot of things to go over on this fantastic pay-per-view. You know, everybody thought AEW was literally kind of dying off and, kind of just like, kind of dying down a bit. But AEW was like, fuck that. We are going to be giving you guys the best pay-per-view that we could possibly get. And it's honestly safe to say this probably topped Elimination Chamber. Let's be 100% honest with ourselves. This pay-per-view was damn near perfect. I'm being 100% honest with you guys. Bryan Danielson and MJF delivered it an absolute 60-minute classic. This match that they had will go down as probably as one of the best matches of all time. And I'm not even kidding with you guys. And all of the MJF haters out there, all of the doubters that do not like MJF, I'm hearing that they are, let me hear this for a second. Oh yeah, they're a little bit silent because they just saw MJF could actually wrestle. Wow, I've known that the entire time, but clearly these people on social media did not even know that whatsoever. But overall, that match was fucking awesome. I'll go through that. The House of Black win the AEW Trios titles. FTR, yes, FTR make their returns attacking the Gun Club. Hopefully, they can take those titles away from the Guns because I'm tired of seeing those belts on the Guns. Plus, Jon Moxley and Hangman Page go to war. Holy shit, this show is awesome. We got a lot of things to talk about right here on the show, but before I get on with all of this craziness regarding AEW Revolution, make sure to like and subscribe to the WrestleHavoc Podcast right here on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and as the frickin' referee would say, ring, ring, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Also, the WrestleHavoc Podcast is also available on audio platforms. It is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts. So if you guys want to listen to the WrestleHavoc Podcast in audio format, it is available on all of those platforms. Plus, if you guys missed it, the SmackDown review is up on the channel. Originally, my plan was to upload episode 10 of the podcast, but unfortunately, I did not find time enough so I can upload episode 10 of the podcast. I was going to be giving you guys my preview and predictions for Revolution, and I actually had half the video filmed, but something came up and I had to stop filming. So, unfortunately, I didn't give you guys episode 10 of the podcast. But if you guys haven't checked out the SmackDown review, it is actually up on the channel. We talk about Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns finally going face-to-face in the WWE, of course, is before their WrestleMania main event match that's going to be taking place on April 2nd, I believe. But we talk about a lot of things on the show. A very good SmackDown show, to say the least, in my opinion. But if you guys haven't checked out the SmackDown review, the link will be in the description of this video. All right, let's talk about Revolution. I thought Revolution was a fantastic show from top to bottom. I say that because of the fact, and it is no secret, AEW, I don't want to say they're masters at pay-per-view, but definitely every time when you pay those $50 for an AEW pay-per-view 4 or 5 times a year, now it's going to be like 8 times a year, because not only we have the addition of Forbidden Door, but we also got the 3 Ring of Honor pay-per-views happening as well. Granted, the Ring of Honor pay-per-views are much cheaper, that being $10 cheaper. But, yeah, man, AEW always tends to find a way to give you a bang for your buck, no pun intended. And Revolution was just that. I don't know why, but Revolution, man, This is the 2020, 2021, 2022. This is the fourth ever AEW Revolution, and so far, every Revolution has topped itself from top to bottom. The only dud that I saw when it came to Revolution was the botch ending from the exploding barbed wire deathmatch that took place 2 years ago in Daly's place. But aside from that, Revolution has basically, topped itself constantly. Last year, Revolution was basically considered the best pay-per-view of 2022. It's honestly safe to say that Revolution 2023 is by far, and we're only in March, keep in mind, the best pay-per-view of 2023 so far. And I mean that wholeheartedly because I said the same thing about Elimination Chamber last month. And Elimination Chamber was a very, very good show. WWE and AEW are pulling out all the stops, and us, at the end of the day, us as wrestling fans, at the end of the day, are the winners of this whole thing. There's no fucking war between WWE and AEW. Get that shit out of your heads. But let's talk about Revolution. We got to go through this awesome-ass card. One thing I will say about this show was that the show flowed really, really well. I remember last year, Double or Nothing, right? It was headlined by CM Punk and Hangman Adam Page. Although I thought the show was very good, I thought there was a lot of matches on that card that really did not need to be on that card. A lot of those matches that took place at Double or Nothing, especially in the middle of the show, were kind of, tiresome, and the crowd was somewhat dead, if you really ask me. And really, the most important matches were basically Anarchy in the Arena and the Punk and Hangman match. But, of course, AEW tended to figure out a way to kind of fix that issue with Forbidden Door and then All Out. But, unfortunately, nobody talked about the pay-per-view itself because of what transpired at the press conference. And, of course, Full Gear, in which I attended to. And it was a great show overall. It was a great show that I saw live as well. But, overall, this show took the cake. Now, granted, there was less matches on this show, considering the fact that, of course, the main event is guaranteed to be 1 hour long, considering it's an Iron Man match. But at the same time, I believe there was like 8 or 9 matches on the show, that is enough for a pay-per-view that you can only pay $50 for. Honestly, that is clearly enough. You don't need 12 matches, 13 matches, 15 matches on the show. 8 to 9 is, for me at least, the minimum. Now, WWE's formula is much different. They focus more on quality, considering the fact that they only do 5 matches nowadays. They basically book their pay-per-views like a takeover. Elimination Chamber basically showed you exactly that. But overall, you're only paying $4 a month considering it's on a streaming service, and unlike AEW, you had to pay the full $50. So I totally understand why Tony Khan books a lot of matches on the show. But was the build for Revolution the best? No, let's be honest with ourselves. The build for Revolution was kind of stagnant, in my opinion. Not terrible, but, they started announcing matches like 2 weeks before the pay-per-view, which was absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. And a lot of people were saying, oh, this pay-per-view is looking mid, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, I knew for a fact that this pay-per-view was going to hit hard, and it definitely did. And overall, I thought Revolution was a damn good, and I mean a damn good show. All right. Let's talk about the first match of the evening. And, of course, our first match of the evening, we got Chris Jericho wrestling Ricky Starks in the rematch, of course. Ever since January, Ricky Starks has been feuding with not only Chris Jericho, but also the Jericho Appreciation Society. And, of course, they had a match. I believe it was on the first Dynamite of January. And Ricky Starks actually got the win over Chris Jericho. And a lot of people were questioning Ricky Starks as to, why do you want a rematch with Chris Jericho even though you already beat Chris Jericho? Pretty much common sense right there. But overall, was I really excited for this match? Originally, if you were to tell me a couple of months ago, I would have been like, oh, hell yeah, I really do want to see, a feud between Chris Jericho and Ricky Starks. But I will say, throughout, the build to this match, I really wasn't invested whatsoever. They had the Garcia-Guevara gauntlet, which wasn't, if you really think about it, wasn't really a gauntlet anyway, because that didn't even last long at all. Nobody wanted to see a fucking gauntlet. But overall, man, I thought the build for this match was not really the best, and I wasn't really that invested in what the hell was going on between both Chris Jericho and Ricky Starks. But that is not to say that the match did not deliver, because I genuinely think that the match absolutely delivered. So let's get on with the match. Both immediately fight it out. We get repeated chops by Ricky Starks, followed by a couple of body shots. We got a couple of chops by Chris Jericho, the Ocho. After that, we get a shoulder tackle by Starks. At this point, Jericho is on the outside, but then Starks goes for the Tope Suicida. After that, he sends Jericho to the barricade, but then Jericho gets sent back in the ring. We get a kick by Jericho, followed by a chop, and then he sends Starks into the corner. At this point, Jericho flips off the crowd, and then Starks fights back with a couple of shots to the midsection. Then Jericho fires back, but then Jericho tries to go for the lion salt, but actually misses the lion salt. And then we get a couple of chops by Starks. Starks then later gets caught by Chris Jericho, but then Jericho picks him up and drives him across the top rope. And before I continue on, did I also mention that the Jericho Appreciation Society was also banned from ringside? I forgot to mention that. Jericho then takes out Starks and sends him to the outside to the barricade. And then Jericho drives Starks to the barricade, and then he sends him to the ring. Jericho then goes for repeated rights, and then he drives his boot into the corner on Starks. We get a couple of chops by Starks, followed by a knee on Starks by Jericho. Jericho then drives Starks on his knee with a backbreaker after that. We get a couple of slaps by Jericho. Basically, Jericho at this point is slapping Starks around. But then Starks fires back with a couple of slaps of his own. Then we get repeated rights by Starks, followed by a couple of back elbows. Then after that, Starks gets sent into the corner upside down. Jericho then goes for the springboard dropkick after that. And then Starks at this point is on the apron, but then Jericho goes for the baseball slide on Starks, taking him to the outside. Jericho then sends Starks into the corner, but then Jericho is in control over Starks. Jericho then drives his elbows onto the ribs of Starks, I should say. Starks then fights back, but then Starks hits a shot on Jericho. Starks then later hits the Tornado DDT. We get a cover by Starks and a near fall, but then Starks goes to the top, but then Chris Jericho comes in. He hits a chop on Starks, but then Jericho climbs up to the top. Starks then fights back. Starks then drops Jericho to the mat, but then he gets caught up in a knee. After that, Jericho picks him up and hits the Death Valley Driver. After that, we get a cover by Jericho and a near fall. Jericho continues to punish Ricky Starks by going for a couple of chops. He sends Starks into the corner. He tries to go for the code breaker, but then Starks counters into a powerbomb. We get a cover by Starks and a near fall, but then Starks tries to go for the Rochambeau, but then Chris Jericho escapes. Starks then tries to go for the spear, but then Chris Jericho... This is actually one of my favorite spots of the whole match. So basically, what happened is Starks tries to go for the Rochambeau. Jericho escapes. Then Starks goes for his all-famous spear. You guys know how much I love Ricky Starks' spear. He tries to go for the spear, but then Jericho catches him and hits the Codebreaker. What a badass spot that was. Both exchange shots. Jericho then gets taken to the apron, but then he goes to the top. He misses a crossbody attempt, but then gets caught into a spear. We get a cover and a near fall. Both then exchange shots. Jericho then gets caught in a thrust kick. After that, Starks then goes to the top. He lands on his feet from a moonsault attempt, but then Jericho catches Starks and applies the walls of Jericho. Starks then reverses. We get repeated shots by Starks, but then Starks applies the single leg Boston Crab. After that, Sammy Guevara comes in, even though the Jericho Appreciation Society are banned from ringside. But what happens? Action Andretti immediately takes him out. Jericho, all of a sudden, doing his typical heel shtick, grabs the bat, that being Floyd, and the referee is distracted. After that, he hits Starks with the bat onto the rib of Starks, or the ribs, I should say, of Starks. Starks then counters the Judas Effect attempt, but then Ricky fights back on Jericho. We get a couple of kicks by Starks onto the chest of Jericho. Then Starks catches Chris Jericho and hits the Rochambeau. We get a cover, and Ricky Starks gets the win over Chris Jericho. Overall thoughts on this match. I really did enjoy this match. This match was absolutely fantastic in my opinion. Was it the best match of the night? No, it wasn't, but it definitely did get the job done. Where do we go from here? Do I want to see Ricky Starks and Chris Jericho feud after this? I'm going to be honest with you guys. No, I don't. I want to see Chris Jericho move on. I also want to see Ricky Starks move on from other things besides Chris Jericho, because at this point, I'm kind of sick and tired of the feud. And to be quite honest with you guys, even though I do think the Jericho Appreciation Society is very much entertaining, I'm starting to get a little bit tired of the Jericho Appreciation Society, in my opinion. And this is coming from a fan of the JAS. So that is pretty much to say the least. But overall, that was a pretty good opening match between both Ricky Starks and Chris Jericho to open Revolution. In our second match of the evening, we got Jungle Boy Jack Perry versus Christian Cage in the final burial match. Yes, the final burial match, AEW's version of a buried alive match. What are my thoughts on this match? This story has been going on since the summer of last year, ever since Christian Cage turned on Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus. And then, of course, he basically talked all that shit in front of his family. And Christian Cage has been a savage on the microphone ever since. Of course, Jungle Boy also did beat Luchasaurus in the steel cage match this past November at Full Gear as well. But we haven't had a singles match between Jungle Boy and Christian Cage yet. But we finally have it, and it's called the Final Burial. It is their version of a buried alive match. What are my thoughts on this? I thought this was a great match overall. This was pretty much a fantastic match nonetheless. Jungle Boy looked great. Christian was absolutely fantastic. And those last few moments of the match really were probably the best moments of the whole match as a whole. But the match starts. Both immediately fight it out. We get a takedown by Jack. We get repeated rights by Christian Cage. Cage then goes to the outside, but then Cage grabs the boot of Jack Perry, but then Jack pulls Christian onto the ring post. After that, Cage regains control. We got a chop by Cage, but then Cage bails out from a suicide dive attempt. After that, Christian Cage goes to the crowd, and then both Christian Cage and Jack Perry fight it out. Jack then spills beer on Christian Cage, which was pretty funny to see. We got a chop by Jack Perry, and then he takes Cage to the barricade. And then both go to the ramp, and then he picks him up, but then Cage escapes. We get a shot to the back of Cage, but then Cage hits him back. He basically takes him back into the ring. After that, Jack Perry is in control over Christian Cage. We get repeated rights by Jack Perry, but then Christian drops Jack with a handful of his hair. After that, Cage goes for repeated rights, but then Jack's mom and sister are on the front row. Christian is in control, working on the arms of Jack. We get a bunch of "fuck you, Christian" chants. After that, Cage misses a right hand, but then Jungle Boy goes for the tope suicida. After that, he sends him to the barricade once again, and then he sends him to the steel steps. And then he drives him repeatedly onto the steel steps, but then Jungle Boy takes Christian's elbow onto the steps. And then it looks like he wants to stomp the arm of Christian, but then Jack Perry gets swooped by Cage onto the steel steps after that. Cage then gets his belt off, and he just spanks the hell out of Jack Perry repeatedly with that belt. He continues to hit him with the belt up the ramp onto the stage, and this is where the later portions of the match start to happen, and chokes Jungle Boy after that, but then Christian opens the lid of the casket, but then he finds chairs, and then after that we get a couple of elbow strikes by Jack Perry, followed by a back elbow by Cage. He picks up Cage, but then Cage escapes. Jack picks up Cage, but then Jack escapes once again. Cage goes for a backdrop on the stage with all of the dirt after that. Christian then tries to go for the kill switch, but then gets tossed outside of the ramp. After he gets tossed outside of the ramp, Jack goes for a somersault on Cage. After that, Jungle Boy wants to hit Cage with the chair, but then Cage, being the typical heel that he is, hits a low blow. Cage then takes Jungle Boy to the casket headfirst repeatedly. He then opens the casket, and then he takes Jack into the casket. Cage then takes it, but then Jungle Boy allows him to close it. But then at this point, Jungle Boy kind of weighs back a little bit. Cage then throws dirt on Jungle Boy. Cage finally hits the kill switch. But then after that, Cage sets up the concerto on Jungle Boy, but he misses it. Jack Perry then gets a shovel, and then we get a takedown by Cage. He drives the shovel on Jack Perry, but then Jungle Boy later applies the snare trap on Christian Cage. But then the shovel is on the teeth of Cage. Completely botched that. But then he sets up both chairs on Cage, but then Jungle Boy hits the chair on the head, and he hits the one and only concerto. And then he drags Cage to the casket. He kisses Cage in the forehead, and then he closes the casket, and Jungle Boy gets the win in this final burial match. What are my thoughts on this match? I didn't really know what to think of this match, but after the match concluded, I really, really enjoyed it. I really loved the last few moments of the match. That was where it really got intense, really. Everything else was kind of fallen by the wayside, in my opinion, but overall, Jungle Boy, of course, was going to be getting the win. There was no way in hell that Christian Cage was going to be getting the win. I mean, it would make no sense for AEW to constantly tell the story one more time once again. This was basically the whole definition of a blow-off, and this was exactly what it was. This was a blow-off. Now, the question that we all need to ask ourselves is, where is Jungle Boy going to go now? I mean, Jungle Boy did say a couple of weeks ago on Dynamite that he's going after singles gold. What does that mean? Is he going after the TNT title? Is he going after the All-Atlantic title? Heck, I'll even throw you another one. Is he going after the AEW World title? Now, MJF did name drop Jungle Boy, I believe, at the media scrum while he was eating pickles like a certain Second City Saint. But, I mean, you never know. I mean, there could be a lot of possibilities. MJF did name drop the pillars of this company in the media scrum. So we're going to have to wait and see. Do I think Jungle Boy Jack is going to eventually wrestle MJF down the road? Yes. Do I think it's going to be now? Do I think it's going to be next month? No, I do not think so. I think currently right now the best spot for Jungle Boy is definitely that mid-card in that TNT title, that All-Atlantic title scene. And then later on, maybe by the end of the year, you can definitely get to that main event level when it comes to Jungle Boy. But that is just me personally. You guys may have a different suggestion, but that is just what I would do in my opinion. But overall, this was a great match by both Jungle Boy and Christian Cage. We got the Elite versus the House of Black for the AEW World Trios Championships. Overall thoughts on this match. Now, it's safe to say that this match barely had any build at all. We all knew that the House of Black were going to be the next challengers for the Elite's AEW World Trios titles. But at the same time, you know, all AEW basically did was short 30-second, maybe less than 30-second video packages involving the House of Black, and just the House of Black just appearing and disappearing from the ring. That's basically all that they have been doing, in my opinion. And that is not, in my opinion, the definition of a full build. This match barely had any build, but I will say this, the match definitely made up for it, but also the outcome made up for it, because I clearly stated that if the House of Black does not win this match, what the hell are the House of Black going to be doing? That is the question that we really need to ask ourselves. But now, since the House of Black are at the top of the Trios division, definitely there is some glimmer of hope that the House of Black can definitely find their footing in the Trios division. And I definitely think that they did. And also, we need to ask ourselves, after this match, what happens with the Elite? Is Kenny Omega going to go back to a single star? Who knows? This is the same night that FTR came back, and it's created a lot, and I mean a lot, of speculation on social media. So we really need to really think about what is going on. But those are my thoughts on that. But Kenny, we're going to be starting with going through the match. Kenny and Buddy Matthews start the match. We got a bunch of waistlock switches by both. Buddy goes after the arm of Kenny Omega, but then both no-sell their own shoulder tackles. We get a bunch of quick-paced moves by both Buddy Matthews and Kenny Omega. Malachi Black then makes the tag. Both lock up. We get a boot by Omega, followed by an arm drag. After that, we get an arm drag by Malachi of his own. Omega almost gets caught, but then after that, he tries to go for the one-winged angel, but then also what happens after that, Black almost hits the Black Mask. So counter after counter, basically, between both men. At this point, both men face off. Matt Jackson makes the tag. Matt Jackson wants Brody King, so then Brody tags in. Brody then misses a chop, and then we get a double drop kick by Brody King. We get a shoulder tackle by Brody on Omega, but then the Elite are on the outside. The House then looks like they're about to triple jump over the top rope, but what happens is the Elite come in just in time, and both teams immediately brawl. That was a great moment in the match, in my opinion. Nick Jackson then takes out everybody, but then Buddy Matthews gets sent to the outside. Matt Jackson then goes to the top, but then he hits a crossbody onto the outside on Black on Buddy Matthews. Brody King and Kenny are in the ring. We get a Hurricane Rana by Kenny on Brody, but then Kenny goes for the somersault over the top rope. After that, Nick goes to the top, but then Nick goes for the 450 splash on Brody King. We get a cover and a 1 count. We get a high kick by Nick on Brody. But then after that, Brody takes him out. He takes out Matt and Kenny. But then after that, Brody sends Kenny to the barricade after that. Malachi Black then goes for the pump kick on Matt, but then Brody goes for the crossbody on Kenny Omega onto the barricade. Once we're back into the ring, it looks like Brody wants to work on Nick. We got a couple of chops by Brody, but then we got a roll-up by Nick Jackson. After that, we get a near fall. Nick Jackson goes for the Enziguri after that. After the Enziguri, Brody tags himself in. Then he throws Nick across the ring. We get a spinning kick by Nick, but then Kenny makes the tag in. And then he goes to the top. We get a frog splash by Kenny. He takes everybody out. He hits a discus clothesline after that. Brody then no-sells that discus clothesline, but then he goes for the basement dropkick, and then he goes for the leg drop across the back of the neck of Brody King. We get a cover and a near fall. Kenny then picks up Brody King, but then we get the you can't escape moonsault after that. Brody then gets the knees up, but then we get the shotgun dropkick by Buddy Matthews. Kenny at this point is in the corner, but then we get a couple of super kicks by the Bucks on Matthews and Malachi Black, but then Brody misses the cannonball. We get a cover by Kenny and a near fall. Kenny then tries to pick up Brody King, but then Brody ends up fighting back. Brody then goes for the lariat, but then Buddy Matthews tags in. Malachi then makes the tag, but then we get a double team by the House of Black. Nick Jackson then comes in. We get a kick by Malachi, and then he goes for the kick on Kenny. Then we get a knee bar by Malachi Black. After that, Matt Jackson goes after his elbow. We get basically repeated super kicks by the Bucks, so they are going for a super kick party. But then Buddy Matthews goes for the double knees on Nick. Matt goes for the super kicks. Then after that, Matt goes for the sliced bread. Then Malachi goes for a knee, but then both Kenny and Malachi exchange shots. Both then fight it out. We get a knee by Kenny, but then Malachi goes for a knee of his own. V-trigger by Kenny into the corner, but then at this point, both men are down. Nick then goes for the springboard. After that, Julia Hart grabs his boot, but then Brody applies a sleeper on Nick Jackson on the apron. Matt goes for the super kick, but then we get a kick to the knee of Brody. We get a super kick again by Matt, but then Kenny goes for the V-trigger, taking out Brody King. We got a couple of kicks by Malachi, but then Kenny goes for the Snapdragon suplex. After that, he goes for a second Snapdragon suplex, but what happens? Julia Hart is on the apron. She faces off with Kenny Omega, but then Malachi misses. He tries to go for the Black Mask, but he misses, but then Kenny goes for a one-winged angel, and then he tries to go for the V-trigger, but what happens is, by accident, he hits a V-trigger on Julia Hart, sending her to the outside. And then after that, Black comes in. He goes for the Black Mask. We get a cover and a near fall when Nick Jackson makes the save. After that, Dante's Inferno on Kenny. After that, we get a cover and a near fall when Matt Jackson makes the save. After that, Brody goes for the suicide dive onto the Bucks. The House of Black then surround Kenny in the ring. The Bucks are nowhere to be found. After that, the Bucks finally come in, but then we get a bunch of super kicks on Malachi in the ring. Super kick on Buddy. We get a triple super kick by the Elite on Brody King. Matt Jackson tags in. They hit the BTE trigger. We get a cover by Matt, and Buddy Matthews comes in. Nick Jackson is on the apron. Nick goes for the Gamangiri, and it looks like the Bucks are going to be going for the Melter Driver. But what happens is Buddy counters, and this was a clean-ass counter. He goes for a kick. Then we get a back heel kick by Malachi Black, followed by the Dante's Inferno. We get a cover, and the House of Black win the AEW World Trios Championships. Overall thoughts on this match. This match was fantastic, in my opinion. This was definitely a fantastic match overall. The counters after counters, the chemistry that guys like Malachi Black and Kenny Omega had in the match was absolutely fantastic as well. But overall, man, this was definitely great stuff in my opinion. But overall, where do we go from here, man? Where do you go when it comes to the House of Black? Many different possibilities, because I genuinely see that the House of Black will be holding those trios titles for a long period of time. But definitely the House of Black winning those trios championships was definitely the right decision to make. Again, I say this constantly. If the House of Black didn't win this match and they didn't win the trios titles, I genuinely believe they would have definitely have been lost in the shuffle like they did last year. But also at the same time, with the Elite losing the trios titles, what's next? What's next for the Elite? That's the question that we really need to ask ourselves. A lot of people want Kenny Omega to come back as a singles wrestler, and I can't really blame you for that. I feel like the best Kenny Omega is the Kenny Omega that will give us fucking phenomenal matches on a singles level. Because look at the match that he had with Ospreay at the Tokyo Dome at Wrestle Kingdom. That was clearly a fantastic match overall. But, it's things that we need to talk about. But another thing we need to talk about is what feud is the Elite going next? Now, a lot of people are creating the speculation about CM Punk. There's a lot of CM Punk name dropping at the press conference. So does that mean that CM Punk could possibly come back and feud with the Elite? We do not know. But the thing is the best thing about this is we got to tune in and see what the hell is going on. But that was the trios match. Malachi Black, Brody King, and Buddy Matthews are your new AEW World Trios Champions. In our next match of the evening, we got Jamie Hayter and Saraya versus Ruby Soho in a three-way match for the AEW Women's World Championship. Great match overall. For someone that hasn't really, I definitely had high hopes when it came to this whole homegrown versus established storyline between the women. It was starting to die down for me a little bit. I thought the work that Saraya and Toni Storm were kind of delivering on Dynamite these past couple of weeks, I just didn't really care. But not only that, I thought the spray paint was still relatively cringe, and I still think that spray paint is relatively cringe to this day. But overall, I will say, man, this women's match was absolutely fantastic, and the ending that happened after the match was even much, much, much better. So we got Jamie Hayter taking on Saraya, taking on Toni Storm, or Ruby Soho, my apologies, in a three-way match for the AEW Women's World title. The match starts, Jamie goes after Saraya. Saraya then sends Jamie to the steel steps. Saraya then sends her to the barricade, but then Ruby goes for the dropkick. Toni Storm is on the outside, but then Saraya gets taken to the barricade. Ruby then hits a crossbody on the crowd on both Jamie and Saraya. We get a couple of elbow strikes by Saraya and Ruby Soho. All three women at this point continue to fight it out. We get a couple of chops by Ruby Soho, but then Ruby gets taken chest first onto the barricade by both Jamie Hayter and Saraya. Saraya then sends Jamie Hayter in the ring. Saraya then goes for the headbutt. Then Saraya at this point is in control over Jamie Hayter, and then Britt Baker is on the outside. Saraya then drops her down to the mat. We get a cover and a near fall, but then Saraya is on the apron and hits repeated knees on the women's champion Jamie Hayter. Saraya then tries to suplex Jamie, but then Jamie proceeds to fight back. Jamie then drops Saraya down on the apron. Then Ruby off the top hits a crossbody. After that, Ruby drops Hayter onto the mat. We get a cover and a near fall. And then she applies a rear chinlock on Jamie Hayter, but then Saraya enters the fray. Ruby then applies the sleeper hold, but then both Ruby and Saraya are in each corner of the ring. Jamie then takes both of them out, but then suplexes them both, but then Saraya and Ruby Soho. So what happens is Jamie Hayter actually suplexes both Jamie Hayter and Ruby Soho, which is... No, she suplexed both Saraya and Ruby Soho. That's what I will say. We get a double lariat by Jamie Hayter. We get a cover on Saraya, and we get a near fall. We then get a cover on Ruby Soho, and we get a near fall. We get a knee by Ruby, but then we get a knee by Jamie. Saraya then drops down Jamie Hayter, but then Ruby goes for somewhat of a move. Completely messed up my notes right there. Jamie then goes for a backbreaker on Ruby. At this point, all three women just fight it out, exchanging shots at the same time. Saraya goes for a couple of slaps. After that, Saraya kind of just was like, stop, and kind of like put her head in her ears, but then Ruby and Jamie basically beat her down, which is a pretty funny part in the match. Ruby then goes for the run-up Hurricane Rana, but then we get a cover by Ruby and a near fall. Ruby then goes to the top, but then Jamie Hayter comes in. Jamie goes to the top, but then Saraya comes in. She does the Tower of Doom spot, but then we get a cover by Saraya on Jamie. and then we get a near fall. Saraya then applies her submission on Ruby Soho, but then Jamie Hayter out of nowhere hits the lariat. After that, Toni Storm comes in to interfere. Granted, it's no disqualification, so it really doesn't matter, but still. Jamie takes out Toni Storm, and then Saraya drops down Jamie Hayter. At this point, Britt Baker is on the apron. Ribs with, or I should say Ruby, not Ribs. I wrote Ribs by accident. Ruby Soho goes for the Destination Unknown on Saraya. We get a cover and a near fall when Jamie comes in and saves herself from losing the belt. After that, Ruby and Jamie Hayter exchange shots. We get a boot by Jamie, but then Hayter goes for a lariat. After that, we get a roll-up by Ruby on Jamie Hayter, and we get a near fall. Ruby then misses the kick. We get a roll-up by Jamie Hayter, and we get a near fall. But then Jamie Hayter goes for the bridge pin attempt and wins the match and retains the title. After the match, immediately after Jamie retains, Toni Storm comes in and beats Jamie Hayter down. And then Britt Baker comes in, but then Ruby is in the corner. Ruby then sends Saraya in the corner, and then at this point, everybody celebrates. And then what happens is basically Ruby kind of attacks she first off attacks Saraya and Toni Storm, and it looks like she's going to be taking the side of Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter. But what happens is Ruby, when both heels were on the outside and Ruby was with both Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter, what happens is Ruby immediately goes for the Pele kick, and then she goes for the no future on Britt Baker. And after that, Ruby takes the spray paint, and all three women spray paint Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter. So it looks like the battle lines are about to be drawn. What are my thoughts on that heel turn by Ruby Soho? I'm glad that AEW is finally giving something Ruby Soho to do. Because let's be honest with ourselves. Ruby, in my opinion, my genuine opinion, I genuinely believe that Ruby Soho's run so far in AEW has been somewhat of a disappointment. Because of the fact that really, let's ask ourselves this. Now, granted, she was injured for a period of time, so we can't really make that as, we can make that as an excuse, but at the same time, we're going to be talking about before she, got injured. But let's be honest with ourselves. What really important has Ruby Soho done in AEW ever since she came to the company 2 years ago? Nothing really much. AEW is finally giving her a shot, and I think this is the right way to do it. Not only that, Ruby Soho joining Saraya and Toni Storm makes total sense. After that, what happens is I thought, the heel turn turned out very smoothly. That was one of the smoothest heel turns that I have ever seen, and it played out very well. I absolutely really enjoyed what I watched, and I'm very interested to see where it goes when it comes to this whole women's division storyline. I'm definitely interested, and it's going to be great stuff. We got Jon Moxley versus Hangman Adam Page in the Texas Deathmatch. Overall thoughts on this goddamn match. If y'all don't like blood in AEW, I cannot blame you. I cannot blame you, considering not because of the fact that AEW uses blood. I love blood in my wrestling. But AEW has a tendency to overuse blood all the time. Now, granted, if you really think about blood should be in wrestling, considering the fact that it makes the match more real, in my opinion. But, man, Moxley would bleed almost every week. And sometimes I get worried for the man because, literally, almost every fucking week on Dynamite, Jon Moxley is just cutting himself in the match. But, man, Moxley and Hangman delivered a war. They had a war on pay-per-view. This match was out of this fucking world. And overall, man, I thought everything about this match not only made total sense, but was just very, very, very intense. Jon Moxley and Hangman Page was fantastic on this show. They beat the living shit out of each other, as you should. I mean, it's a Texas Deathmatch. What more do you want? But, man, the barbed wire, the spots, I mean, sometimes I had to look away from the screen. And I relatively do not do that when I watch these types of matches, when it comes to major promotions like WWE or AEW. Now, granted, this is actually very funny that this match is actually happening, considering the fact that the night before, I was actually in Atlantic City watching a bunch of death matches at the Showboat in GCW, which was pretty funny. But overall, man, this match was fan fucking tastic. I loved this match for what it was. Everything about this match was pure perfection. I think this feud is definitely over. But at the same time, I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see where Moxley goes, considering the fact that not only he lost, but he tapped out. Two members, keep in mind, two members of the Blackpool Combat Club tapped out. Of course, Moxley tapped out because he had the chain wrapped around him with Hangman Page, but also Bryan Danielson tapped out. I mean, you know, I would expect Bryan Danielson to fade, but he actually tapped out to MJF in the Iron Man match as well. But overall, this match was absolutely fan-fucking-tastic. Hangman Page comes out to Ghost Riders in the Sky. Great theme, by the way. Hangman immediately goes after Moxley. Moxley fights back, but then Hangman sends Mox to the barricade in the ringside area. At this point, both are in the ring. We get a chop by Hangman, followed by a couple of chops by Mox. Both then exchange shots, and then both fight it out. Hangman then runs into a furious right by Moxley, and then Moxley grabs some barbed wire, but then Hangman takes the blood of the barbed wire, or takes the barbed wire, I should say, and drives it onto Jon Moxley. After that, we get a kick by Hangman on Mox. We get repeated stomps by Hangman, but then Hangman wraps the barbed wire around his fucking boot. At this point, Moxley is busted open. Hangman then goes for the barbed wire on his boot onto the chest of Mox, but then later on, Moxley fights back and goes for repeated right hands. Moxley then takes the barbed wire on his knuckle and hits a right on Hangman. And then Moxley has a fucking fork. This man got a fork. Hangman comes in. Moxley then traps him in a triangle submission, and while he has that triangle submission applied, literally, this man stabs Hangman Page in the forehead with the fucking fork. After that, Moxley goes for the running knee strike. Moxley then grabs the chair, but then he continues to just stab the hell out of Hangman on his forehead with the fork. Moxley then has the chair wrapped in barbed wire. Barbie is alive and well, ladies and gentlemen. Or is that the baseball bat? Moxley then sets the chair into the corner. Hangman goes for repeated rights, but then Hangman, after that, tries to send Mox into the corner. Moxley ducks. He then sends Hangman headfirst onto the barbed wire chair. Moxley then applies a single leg crab on Hangman while laying onto the barbed wire chair. Moxley goes for repeated stomps, but then Moxley hits the barbed wire chair on Hangman Page. Moxley then grabs two chairs, and then Moxley in the ring sends both chairs in front of one another. But then later on, he actually moves those chairs and kind of put it behind one another. And after that, he puts the barbed wire on top of both chairs. And what happens is Hangman picks up Mox, but then Moxley escapes. After that, we get repeated rights by Mox on Hangman from the second rope. Then Moxley headbutts the head of Hangman. But then Hangman, what does this man do? This guy fucking powerbombs Jon Moxley on the chairs with the barbed wire. If that is not brutal, I do not know what fucking is. After that, we get a kick to the back of the head of Mox. Hangman then grabs a piece of the barbed wire, and then Hangman wraps the barbed wire around his torso. Off the top, Hangman hits the moonsault with the barbed wire wrapped around him, which was fucking insane. Hangman then grabs the chair. He sets the barbed wire board on the chair, but then Hangman comes into the ring. Immediately, as soon as Hangman comes into the ring, Moxley goes for the cutter. After that, Moxley brings out a chain and a couple of bricks. Yeah, he brings out a couple of chains and bricks. And then he places the hand of Hangman on both bricks. So he brings in two bricks, he puts his hand in between both of those bricks, and Moxley just stomps on the head of Hangman Page. After that, Moxley takes out chains. He then pile drives Hangman onto those chains. Hangman then gets up on his knees. Moxley then wraps the chain around the knee of Hangman, but then Moxley applies a submission, but then Hangman bites the arm of Moxley. After that, Hangman goes for a right hand, but then Moxley sets up the barbed wire board on both chairs onto the outside, and then we get a stomp to the arm of Hangman Page. Moxley then grabs the barbed wire chair, but then he tries to basically drive Hangman. After that, Hangman counters with the Deadeye attempt, but then Moxley counters back with a sleeper hold. We get a backdrop suplex by Hangman, but then after that, he hits a lariat on Moxley. That's basically the whole gist of the story. We went right back to square one. What was this whole feud about? The lariat that took out Hangman Page. Then we get a discus elbow with the barbed wire on Jon Moxley. Moxley goes for the boot. And then Hangman tries to pick up Mox, but then hits a fall-away slam on the fucking chair. Hangman then tries to take Mox with the Deadeye on the barbed wire chair, but then both men get up. Hangman then lands a crossbody, or I should say he goes for a crossbody, landing Mox onto the barbed wire board. At this point, Moxley gets up at the count of 8 by the referee. Then after that, Moxley gets back in the ring, but then Hangman goes to the top rope. But then Mox moves to the ropes, dropping Hangman down. Moxley then sets up the chairs, but then Moxley then scratches, and I mean scratches, the back of Hangman Page. And after he scratches the back of Hangman Page, Hangman basically does the same thing. After he does the same thing, Moxley then grabs the barbed wire onto the back of Hangman, scratching it, but then Hangman fires back and drives Moxley down. Hangman is on the top, but then Hangman gets pushed onto the barbed wire head first. After that, after he gets dropped by the barbed wire head first, Hangman gets back up on his feet. Hangman then gets back in the ring. Moxley goes for the King Kong Lariat. And then Hangman then tries to go, he basically has a fire in his eyes. At this point, Hangman and Mox exchange blows. We get a lariat by Moxley, but then Hangman comes back and fires one lariat back at Moxley. After that, we get a buckshot countered by Mox into the Death Rider. After that, he stomps Hangman onto the head onto the fucking bricks. Yes, Moxley does the curve stomp, and then you get some chants in the crowd of people singing Seth Rollins' theme, which was absolutely hilarious. Hangman then gets up, but then Mox applies the rear naked choke. Hangman then gets up, but then Hangman fades. Moxley has the change, but then Hangman gets the fuck up once again. How can Hangman go back down? After that, Hangman hits the lariat on Mox on the chain, but then at this point the bricks are stacked on their sides. Hangman then tries to go for the Deadeye, but then Hangman escapes Moxley. Hangman then applies a choke on Mox, but then Mox goes for the low blow. But then Hangman hits Mox onto the head with the bricks. After that, Hangman is on the apron. Moxley, he hits the buckshot lariat. So what happens after this, man? This is actually the best part. So Hangman is on the apron. Moxley, being the badass that he fucking is, knows that he's going to take a buckshot lariat and literally does this on Hangman Page. Hangman hits the buckshot lariat, but what happens? Moxley gets his ass back up. He gets his ass back up, he hits the lariat once again, and then Hangman chokes out Moxley, and once he basically what happens is he hits the lariat on Moxley, and Moxley actually got caught in the chains, so Moxley was getting choked out when it comes to the chains, and what happens? It forces Jon Moxley to tap, and Hangman Page wins the Texas Deathmatch. Overall thoughts on this match. This match was a fucking war. This match was a fucking war. There's no buts or ifs, man. This match was a clinic. This match was a battle between two badasses. Again, that moment when Jon Moxley flipped off Hangman Page before he hit that buckshot lariat, I will forever hold my peace, man. That was one of the most badass moments I've ever seen Jon Moxley fucking do. That was amazing. This match was brutal as hell. It was everything that it basically needed to be. It was a fight between two guys that just absolutely fucking despise one another. And sometimes, and that's the beauty of the whole thing, sometimes simplicity, when it comes to stories in wrestling, are the best types of simplicity because of the fact that, again, the audience is invested. And I genuinely believe a lot of people were invested watching this fucking battle happen right before their eyes. This was a fantastic fucking match, in my opinion. Hats off to both Hangman Page and Jon Moxley. We are 48 minutes into this review. Wow. We're going to go through the matches quickly. I really want to dive deep into the Iron Man match, so I'm not really going to say much about the next two matches, but we got Samoa Joe versus Wardlow for the TNT title. I'm not going to go through moment by moment because that's going to be saved for Danielson and MJF, but overall, I thought it was a good match overall. I thought Samoa Joe and Wardlow was pretty good for what it was. And coming into this match, I definitely knew that Wardlow was going to be winning back or regaining the TNT Championship. And but one thing I will say though, even though I thought the match was good, was it great? No. Could it have been better? Yes. You know, After that Moxley and Hangman match, they were kind of put in a tough position. And let's be honest with ourselves. How do you follow Hangman versus Moxley? You know what I'm saying? The match was very tough to follow. And, unfortunately, the match had to be Joe versus Wardlow. Was it an amazing match? No, but it did what it needed to do. Now, Wardlow is the new TNT champion. What are they going to be doing with Wardlow after that? That's going to be the question that's going to be very interesting because Wardlow is going to be facing Powerhouse Hobbs this Wednesday on Dynamite because Powerhouse Hobbs last week won the Face of the Revolution ladder match. What are they going to be doing with Wardlow? I hope that Wardlow's title run with the TNT title is much better than his first run with the TNT title because I genuinely believe that his first run with the TNT title has definitely been completely forgettable, and when he had that TNT title last time, Wardlow's momentum went from here all the way below. His momentum just kind of derailed after that, but hopefully Wardlow can regain that momentum and definitely go for the fences and be a great champion, for TNT and AEW. We got the Guns versus Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal versus the Acclaim versus Orange Cassidy and Danhausen. Really, the match was, honestly, it was an entertaining match. This was actually the match that I was least looking forward to because I was not really invested in what the Guns were doing. Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal as well. I'm not really that big of a fan of them as well. I mean, I like Jeff Jarrett, but, again, I don't know why they're in the tag team title picture. The Acclaimed is awesome, and I like Orange Cassidy and Danhausen, but overall, the match was pretty entertaining for what it was. It was a great match overall, but at the end of the day, the Guns won. But that is not really the story. The story is what happened after the match. Of course, what happened after the match, we had Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler make their return to All Elite Wrestling. Yes, FTR, the best. Look, hear me out. FTR, the best tag team in the world, made their return to AEW. So basically what happens is Renee cuts a promo. Not cuts a promo. She interviews the Guns after their match, after they retain their titles. And the Guns say that they demand respect. They beat everybody. They beat FTR, the Acclaimed, and they are the best tag team in the world. What happens is they come out, they brawl with the Guns, and then they go for the spike pile driver on Colton Gunn. And then they hit the shatter machine. Not the big rig, they call that shit the shatter machine, which was great to see. I still call it the big rig, but, they hit the shatter machine. And after that, they stand tall. FTR, man, they are back. What the hell is going to be happening when it comes to FTR? I will say this for sure right now. I believe there was a report that came out by PW Insider that FTR, is going to stick around with AEW. But if that is the case, hallelujah. I genuinely believe that FTR's home is definitely AEW. Would I love to see him back in the WWE? Yes. Do I think right now is the time? No. I think, I feel like FTR has a lot more left on their plate. And definitely they got to win back those AEW World Tag Team titles because they were so hot. And I mean, they were very hot last year. And hopefully, right now is the best time for FTR to take those fucking belts away from the Guns. But yeah, FTR is back. It's very interesting. The Elite lost the Trios titles, and FTR is back. Could we be seeing something very interesting? Could we be seeing a certain Second City Saint come back? We do not know. We're going to have to wait and see. We got the main event of the evening. We got MJF, the generational talent, taking on the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, in a 60-minute Iron Man match for the AEW Heavyweight Championship of the world. If this match is not the match of the year, I do not know what is. And I'm being honest right now. I'm being brutally honest. This match was fucking awesome. This match was probably not only MJF's best match in AEW, but so far, Danielson's best match in AEW. And Danielson has had some bangers on AEW television. I mean, we can go back to his match that he had with Roosh. His match with Roosh was amazing. Fucking awesome. But this 60-minute Iron Man match was everything that it needed to be. It put MJF as a character, kayfabe-wise, to the test to see if he can out-wrestle Bryan Danielson. Everything about this was pure perfection. But I'm going to be going through this match move by move, and then I'm going to be giving you my full thoughts on this whole match, because everything was just fucking fantastic. MJF has a ravishing entrance. He comes out, of course, there's a whole group of people playing the violin, playing his theme, and MJF comes out in the devil mask. The same mask, I mind you, that he came out at All Out 2021, where he showed up, revealed himself, and he was going to go after CM Punk for that AEW World title. The match begins. Bryan Danielson is taunting MJF. MJF goes to the outside, and then both lock up. We get an arm drag by MJF, but then MJF mocks the fans with the yes chant. Both lock up once again. Danielson works on the leg of MJF. Both go technical. Yes, you heard me right. MJF went technical on Bryan Danielson. Same thing with Bryan Danielson on MJF. We get Danielson transitioning. Both get back up. Danielson goes for the jumping jacks, as he always does. We get a kick by MJF. MJF goes for the jumping jacks of his own, taunting Bryan Danielson. After that, we get the shoulder tackle by MJF. We get a hip toss by Danielson, followed by a shoulder tackle. Then MJF does the same thing. Goes for a hip toss, but then instead, MJF goes for a slam. MJF tries to go for the elbow, but then misses. Counter after counter by both. We get an arm drag by Danielson. Both get back up on their feet. At this point, we get a standing ovation from the crowd. Keep in mind, this match is 60 minutes. MJF offers a handshake. Danielson goes for a kick on MJF's hand instead. MJF then goes to the crowd. And what happens is MJF throws a drink. Now, apparently, the kid's mom was very upset. And I'll give you guys my thoughts later on in a future video. But there was a lot of backlash regarding that. But MJF basically said, fuck them kids. And he threw that drink on that kid. After that, they then go back out. And then MJF goes to the camera and says, oh no! Will this cost me a star, Dave? Then Danielson gets out. MJF slides in. MJF goes to the strut. And then Danielson goes back in the ring. Danielson goes for the jumping jacks. We get a full Nelson by MJF. We get a roll-up by Danielson. Then we get a near fall. Danielson then goes for the full Nelson. But then Danielson tries to go for the Romero special. Danielson gets the fingers up on the nose of MJF. Danielson then drives his knee onto the mat. But then MJF takes the referee and tries to basically use the referee as a shield, basically. We got a couple of chops by Danielson and a couple of kicks into the corner. Danielson gets taken headfirst onto the middle turnbuckle. We get repeated stomps by MJF, followed by a backdrop. We get a backdrop once again by MJF. At this point, MJF flips off the crowd. Danielson goes for the inside cradle, and we get a near fall. Danielson goes for the backdrop after that. After the backdrop, Danielson goes for a backdrop once again on MJF. We get an uppercut by Danielson. MJF then tries to escape. MJF then regains control, but then MJF drives Danielson into the corner, shoulder first. MJF then grabs water from under the ring, and he tries to take a break and drinks it. MJF continues to be in control. MJF pulls the hair of Danielson, and then he continues to show off. MJF takes Danielson into the corner, and he sends him to the barricade. After that, he sends Danielson, and, basically what happens is, it looks like he's going to send Danielson to the crowd, but he basically trolls them, and then he takes him back into the ring, which is hilarious. We get a suicide dive by Danielson, but then MJF counters Danielson and drives him shoulder first onto the barricade. MJF continues to work on the left arm of Danielson. After that, Danielson fights back. Danielson goes for a couple of rights, but then MJF goes for the backdrop. We get a cover by MJF into near fall. We get a side slam by MJF. MJF continues to work onto the arm of Danielson, but then on the second rope, MJF goes for repeated rights. Danielson is on the top, but then we get a couple of headbutts by Danielson. Follows up with the sunset flip powerbomb, and then MJF gets dropped face first onto the middle turnbuckle. We get a couple of kicks and chops by Danielson into the corner. He hits the running knee. He goes for a second running knee, and then he goes for a third. After that, Danielson goes for repeated rights. He goes for the Hurricane Rana off the top. We get a cover and a near fall. Danielson runs into a back elbow by MJF. And then MJF goes for the double stomp onto the elbow of Danielson. Danielson then tries to go for the Hurricane Rana, but then MJF counters into the powerbomb, driving Danielson on his knee. We get a cover and a near fall. But then Danielson goes for the label lock. Yes, he goes for the label lock. MJF then slingshots Danielson on the apron. And then Danielson holds on. But then comes back. But then MJF hits a thrust kick on Danielson, taking him to the outside. MJF then goes for the springboard moonsault. So when he goes for the springboard moonsault, he actually lands on his knee. And it looked like he kind of injured himself. But that scared the shit out of me. Danielson goes for the suicide dive. We get a chop by Danielson, but then Danielson goes to the top. He gets caught by Danielson, but then he applies the salt of the earth submission. And then he holds on to Danielson, but then MJF drives him to the mat. We get a cover and a near fall. Danielson goes for the elbow strikes. We get an inside cradle by Danielson, and then we get a side headlock takeover by Danielson. Both reverse. After that, we get a side headlock takeover once again. But then after that, both go for a couple of roll-up reversals as well. We get a backslide by Danielson. We get an inside cradle reversals by both, but then both are around the ring. Danielson almost gets pinned, but then we get a sunset flip by MJF. We get a bunch of roll-up reversals at this point. Both basically go for continuous roll-up reversals at this point. MJF hits a lariat, but then MJF, after that, Danielson, I believe, hits a lariat, and then at this point, both men are down. Danielson gets up at 9. MJF actually gets up as well, but then Danielson goes for the Busaiko knee. We get a cover, and Danielson gets the first fall. Danielson gets the crowd going, but then MJF gets up and then drops down. 33 minutes left into the match. MJF goes for the low blow. We get an inside cradle by MJF. MJF has his first fall. And then after the inside cradle by MJF, you know what this man does? He goes for the cover again and gets the second fall. This man, that's some heel shit right there. Literally, he goes for the inside cradle on Danielson, and he gets the first fall, and he pins him again, and he gets the second fall. That's crazy. MJF gets the lead. At this point, he is in control. Danielson then drops MJF on his knee. Danielson goes for the shotgun dropkick off the top. At this point, MJF sells his knee. MJF is on the outside. We get a chop by Danielson, but then we get a couple of kicks and chops by Danielson on the outside. He sends MJF headfirst onto the chair. Danielson then goes back into the ring, but then Danielson runs towards MJF, but then MJF takes him out. We get a couple of chops by MJF, but then MJF runs and lands into Danielson. We get repeated yes kicks by Danielson after that. Danielson then gets back into the ring. After that, he goes out, but then runs into the running knee on MJF. And MJF goes back into the ring, but then Danielson drives his knee on MJF onto the post. After that, we get a couple of right hands by Bryan Danielson. Danielson then drives the knee of MJF onto the post again. Danielson then drives his knee onto the injured knee of MJF. After that, MJF gets his fingers on his nose once again. Danielson goes for the knee submission. We get a cover and a near fall. At this point, MJF is in control. MJF screams he hates him, keeps on slapping the shit out of him, but then Danielson slaps back. MJF rolls and gets to the bottom rope. He hits repeated kicks by Danielson onto the back of MJF, but then Danielson takes MJF onto the apron. After that, he tries to pile drive him, but then MJF grabs Danielson. Danielson then targets the knee of MJF. We get repeated kicks onto the knee of MJF on the apron, but then MJF is on the top. Danielson, on the top, drives his elbows on MJF. MJF then fights back with repeated rights, and then he knocks him down to the outside. MJF then sends Danielson onto the shoulder. After that, he sets up the timekeeper's table, but then he places Danielson onto the table. MJF then goes to the top. He hits an elbow drop on Danielson. MJF then drags the referee into the ring. Danielson then tries to beat the count, but then Danielson actually finally gets back into the ring. MJF exposes the table. He takes Danielson and he hits a tombstone onto the broken fucking table. Yeah, he goes for he basically hits a tombstone on the broken fucking table. At this point, MJF continues to sell his knee. Danielson is busted open. At this point, we got 20 minutes left, and it's currently 2-2. MJF then goes for the heat sinker. We get a cover by MJF and a near fall. Currently, actually no, we get a cover by MJF and he gets the third fall. It's 3-2. MJF is now in the lead and he drinks water. MJF goes for repeated rights on Danielson. At this point, he is currently in control and says that he fucking sucks and he is the best in the world. That being, he's talking to Bryan Danielson. MJF continues to work and talk shit on Danielson. He slaps Danielson around. At this point, MJF is in control, but then Danielson with a right, but he collapses. MJF snots boogers on Danielson, showing him all the disrespect. MJF wants to give him a shot, wants Danielson to give him a shot, but what happens is Danielson goes for the slap, MJF goes for the headbutt, but then he tries to send Danielson onto the barricade, but then Danielson reverses and sends MJF to the ring post. At this point, Danielson is on the apron. He drives his knee on MJF, but then Danielson goes to the top. Then Danielson jumps off and lands on MJF on the outside. Once we're back into the ring, Danielson goes to the top. MJF goes for an elbow strike, but then MJF goes to the top again. Danielson then escapes, but then MJF lands in between the legs onto the top rope. Then repeated rights by Danielson. Danielson then hits the superplex after that. After that, he goes for the diving headbutt. At this point, MJF is busted open. And when I mean busted open, this man was fucking busted open. We get a cover by Danielson once again and a near fall. Danielson then goes for the Busaiku knee. He applies the label lock. MJF taps out and Danielson has the third fall. It is now tied 3-3 and we have 10 minutes left in the match. Danielson continues on, but then MJF applies the Salt of the Earth submission. Danielson rolls through, and then he applies the label lock, but then MJF reverses. But then Danielson turns it up around. We get a roll-up by MJF, and then we get a near fall. And then he applies the Salt of the Earth, but then MJF drags Danielson into the center of the ring. MJF then grabs the arm of Danielson after that, but then Danielson gets his foot onto the ropes. At this point, we get "This is awesome" chants. Both face off. We get a right hand by MJF. Then we get a right hand by Danielson. Both exchange shots. Both exchange headbutts. We get a right hand by MJF. At this point, both men are just fucking colliding. MJF is crying, and Danielson is laughing. 5 minutes are remaining in the match. Both fight it out. Chop exchanges by both. A high kick by Danielson. We get a rolling elbow by Danielson. Then he takes out MJF. MJF is down. Danielson gets taken to the outside, but then MJF continues to work onto the arm. Then he hits the heat sinker. We get a cover and a near fall. MJF then goes under the ring, and he gets more water. And then he takes Danielson to the top. MJF goes for the chop, and we get a bunch of H2O chants by the crowd, which is hilarious. Both men are on the top. Danielson drives his elbows on MJF. After that, he hits MJF, takes Danielson, and hits the tombstone off the second rope. MJF continues to sell his knee. And then after that, he drags himself onto Danielson. We get a cover and a near fall. Danielson applies a single leg crab on MJF, but then MJF makes it to the rope. But then Danielson drags him back. MJF tries to tap Danielson by grabbing the arm of MJF. Danielson tries to make MJF tap by grabbing the arm of MJF. After that, the clock expires. So what happens is basically, Danielson, I believe he had the label lock. No, he didn't have the label lock. I think he had I completely forgot the submission move that he had on. But what happens is he grabs the arm of MJF, right? And it was a single leg crab. Never mind. I completely forgot what I read. He applied the single leg crab, and what happens is he takes MJF to the ropes, but then he drags him fucking back, and he grabs the arm of MJF so he wouldn't, basically tap out. But what happens after that? The clock expires. But as soon as the clock expires and the bell rings, MJF taps out. After the match, The medical staff come in. MJF is getting oxygen. Yes, he's getting an oxygen mask, which is fucking crazy. Then what happens is the crowd is saying bullshit. They're chanting just like, all this kind of stuff. They were pissed. But what happens? You see the camera panning to the commentators. You get Tony Schiavone literally on his headset, and it looks like, Tony Khan is saying something to him. He comes into the ring. He tells Justin Roberts that the match will continue. Justin Roberts announced that the match will continue for one fall left, but under sudden death rules. After that, MJF just has this fucking shocked look on his face, like, motherfucker, you fucked me over. We get a roll-up by Danielson immediately. We get a near fall. After what happens that, actually before the roll-up, MJF actually gets pissed at Bryce Remsburg, who is the referee of this match. MJF, so after the roll-up, MJF, right, goes for the low blow by basically taking the referee towards him and low blowing Danielson from behind. After that, we get a roll-up by MJF and a near fall. What happens after that? MJF grabs his belt, and the referee sees it, and he says if he uses that belt and he hits it on Danielson, he loses that championship. MJF gives him the belt, and as soon as he gives him the belt, MJF gives him the fucking Dynamite diamond ring. But what happens after that? It did not work. Danielson immediately goes for the fucking Poison Rana. After that, he hits the Busaiku knee on Danielson. We get a cover and a near fall. Danielson then goes for a couple of kicks onto the knee of Danielson. And then Danielson goes right back to where they started when the time limit expired, and he applies the single leg Boston Crab. What happens is MJF has the ring, but what happens, Bryce Remsburg sees it, and he takes the ring away from MJF. After that, MJF tries, just powers himself to get himself onto the fucking ropes. But then MJF, what happens is, as soon as he goes onto the ropes, MJF taps. But what happens after that, Danielson, from Danielson's perspective, Danielson thinks he won the match, but MJF got his hands on the ropes. What happens after that, MJF then is literally on the floor, grabs the oxygen tank. Danielson goes towards the apron portion of the ring. What happens? MJF hits Danielson with the oxygen tank. After that, what happens is Danielson gets taken out. The referee doesn't see it. And then MJF hides the oxygen tank under the ring. And what happens is MJF applies the label lock. Yes, Danielson's own submission. Danielson gets his first hand up. No response. Second hand up. No response. Third hand up. Danielson has his hand up. Danielson is still in this match. But what happens is MJF just continues to just apply that label lock. And what happens? He makes Danielson tap out from his own move. MJF retains the AEW World Title. He beats Bryan Danielson in the 60-minute Iron Man match. I am absolutely speechless right now. This match was perfect. Everything about this. This match will probably go down. And I'm being honest with myself. This match will probably go down as not only the best match so far of 2023, but probably one of the best matches of all time. I'm being 100% honest with myself right here. I'm being 100% real here. This match was so perfect. This match was so good. It brought the A game in not only Bryan Danielson, but it brought the A game in MJF. MJF always had that A game. I'll take that back. MJF always had that A game. But god damn it, man. MJF still has all those haters. He still had all of those fucking haters saying that he can't wrestle, he only talks, he's boring, blah, blah, blah. And I told people as we were headed towards this pay-per-view, do not count out MJF because he will fucking give you the performance of a lifetime. And that is exactly what he did in this match. Everything about this match was amazing. As the thumbnail stated in this video, MJF and Bryan Danielson delivered a 60-minute classic. That is exactly what they gave you. And overall, this match, I wouldn't even give this match 5 stars. I'd give this match literally 1,000,000 stars if I had the chance to. I'd give this match 1,000,000 stars if I had the chance to. I'm being real with you guys. This match was amazing. Every aspect of this match, the hours, the heat that MJF was getting, all the shit that he was saying, Danielson just firing back, everything, the emotion, all of this was pure perfection. And not only that, it had storytelling. And that is exactly what I want you guys to take away from this whole match. This match had story. This match put MJF to the test to see if he can out-wrestle Bryan Danielson. That was the whole story of this match, dating back to November when he hit William Regal with the ring. Everything about this was crazy and perfect. Not only that, he made Danielson tap out with his own submission move. MJF is still your AEW World Champion. This match was fire. The best match of 2023. And I'll say it right here. This was even better than Sami Zayn versus Roman Reigns. And that is a close number 2. That actually topped Sami Zayn versus Roman Reigns. I'm being serious. That match was fucking awesome as well. Like, I'll probably put that at number 2, like, as a close number 2. It's very hard to debate, but this match was amazing. Absolutely pure perfection. But yeah, that was my AEW Revolution pay-per-view review from 2023. Overall, this show was absolutely fantastic. And I'm not going to be like one of those guys saying, oh, AEW is back. No, AEW was always there. AEW was always there. They just kind of had somewhat of a, I don't want to say a down period, but like just a period where, like, really, let's be honest with ourselves, everybody was invested in the whole Bloodline and Sammy stuff. And people still are. But that doesn't mean AEW ain't stopping. AEW is still delivering top-notch professional wrestling. And that is exactly what they showed you on this pay-per-view. This pay-per-view is fantastic, and it will probably go down as the best pay-per-view of 2023, and we're still in March. We are still in March. But yeah, that was my AEW Revolution pay-per-view review. Overall thoughts on this show, this was absolutely fantastic, to say the least. But yeah, guys, I'm going to get out of here. Please like, subscribe, comment down below, push that bell for notifications. I'd be on the lookout for more videos right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast, right here on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the Squared Circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And, as the frickin' referee would say, ring, ring, ring that damn bell for more notifications. And as always, it is Flamin' Rick from the WrestleHavoc Podcast, signing out.